Most of Chinese history was dominated by men. But for one brief moment, there was the Hongzhang 时代, or red makeup era. This was a time led by the female emperor Wu Zetian, when women were not just consorts, they were government officials, strategists, and commanders. And at the very center of this female court were two of the most powerful women in Chinese history, Shangguan Wan'er, the gown and cap chancellor, and Princess Taiping, the daughter of Wu Zetian. One was the brilliant scholar official who rose from being a palace slave to drafting all of the empire's edicts. The other was the ambitious and formidable princess, described by Wu Zetian herself as being like her in her political cunning. They were an unlikely pair. Together, they formed a political partnership so strong they led Wu Zetian's court and changed the course of the history of the Tang Dynasty. Hey everyone, and welcome to Tea with Amy. Today, we will tell the story of this incredible alliance. We'll follow the incredible friendship of Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping from their rise to the top of the world to the tragic conflict that brought it all crashing down. Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping were born around the same time, in 664 and 665 CE. But their worlds could not have been more different. Let's start with Shangguan Wan'er. She was born into a tragedy of Wu Zetian's making. Her grandfather, Shangguan Yi, was a powerful and respected chancellor of the Tang Dynasty court. Wu Zetian was the empress to Emperor Gaozong of the Tang Dynasty at the time. As empress, Wu Zetian was supposed to be in charge of the inner court and the imperial harem. However, ambitious and capable, she had become powerful in the government itself. In 664 CE, Emperor Gaozong became wary of Wu Zetian's influence and her political meddling and secretly ordered Shangguan Yi to draft an official edict to depose her. Unfortunately for him, Wu Zetian discovered this, and her response was swift and absolute. She immediately confronted Emperor Gaozong about this, and he quickly backed down, pushing the blame onto Shangguan Yi. As punishment, Shangguan Yi and his son, Shangguan Tingzhi, who was Shangguan Wan'er's father, were executed for treason. In an instant, the Shangguan family was ruined. Shangguan Wan'er, a newborn infant, was branded the granddaughter of a traitor. She and her mother, Lady Zhen, were not executed, but were instead sentenced to a life of servitude. They became stay slaves and were imprisoned in the Yeting, the grim service quarters of the inner palace. This could have been the end of their story, but Lady Zhen was a high-born, educated woman. Trapped in this prison, she decided if her daughter was to have any future, it would be through the one thing Wu Zetian herself respected: talent. According to later accounts, she transformed their living quarters into a rigorous school. While other girls were learning the rules of decorum, Shangguan Wan'er was being trained in the ways of a scholar. Her mother drilled her day and night in the classics, in poetry, in history, and in the complex rules of government. Her education was her only weapon, her only path to escape. And Shangguan Wan'er did not let her mother down. She was brilliant. While Shangguan Wan'er was fighting for survival in the slave quarters, Princess Taiping was being raised in the imperial household. Princess Taiping's birth name was not recorded in official historical records, but some modern accounts refer to her name as Li Lingyue. Princess Li was born around 665 CE, the youngest and most beloved daughter of Emperor Gaozong and Wu Zetian. She was highly favored by Wu Zetian and was the living symbol of Wu Zetian's imperial power. She was bright and became ambitious and politically cunning. The new book of Tang even states that Wu Zetian herself remarked that this daughter was just like her. But her childhood was not just a story of privilege. It was also one of trauma. According to some popular but debated anecdotes, something horrible happened when Princess Li was visiting her grandmother's house when she was around 5 or 6 years old. Apparently, her cousin He Lan Mingzhi abused and assaulted her maids while they were there. One later account even claims that the princess herself was assaulted as well. Wu Zetian's reaction was not just that of a mother, it was that of a ruler. Historical records clearly document that He Lan Mingzhi was already involved in politics that Wu Zetian did not like. But some accounts suggest that Wu Zetian leveraged this assault to get rid of He Lan Mingzhi for good. She had He Lan Mingzhi exiled and arranged for him to be killed. This was a brutal early lesson for Princess Li. The ultimate solution to any political or personal threat was in its total elimination. Around 670 CE, Princess Li's grandmother died, and Wu Zetian had the princess ordained as a Taoist nun, officially to pray for her grandmother's spirit. It was at this time that the princess received her official title of Taiping, which meant Great Peace. In 769 CE, this new title became a powerful political tool. Envoys from the neighboring Tubo kingdom arrived, demanding her hand in a political marriage. But Emperor Gaozong had no intention of sending his favorite daughter to the remote frontier. Instead, he established the Taiping Temple for the princess and officially informed Tubo envoy that the princess was a holy woman and was ineligible for marriage. The princess had learned how to use a title and a ceremony as a political weapon. But this ineligibility for marriage was clearly just a trick. In 681 CE, Princess Taiping married her cousin, the handsome Xue Shao. Later accounts described it as a happy marriage. With a lavish and spectacular wedding, she had children with Xue Shao and was the blessed and loved princess. In 683 CE, Emperor Gaozong passed away, and Princess Taiping's older brother Li Xian took the throne as Emperor Zhongzong. Empress Wu Zetian was now the Empress Dowager. In 684 CE, Wu Zetian replaced Emperor Zhongzong with another son, who was easier to control. This was Li Dan, who became Emperor Ruizong. Then, in 688 CE, Princess Taiping's world changed. Wu Zetian was now in full control of the empire and was purging any potential rivals. Princess Taiping's brother-in-law, Xue Yi, was found to be a participant in a failed rebellion against Wu Zetian. Her beloved husband, Xue Shao, was implicated as an accomplice. Wu Zetian showed no mercy, and Xue Shao was arrested and starved to death in prison. This was the moment that many modern accounts describe as Princess Taiping's turn to darkness. Her mother had now murdered her husband, just as she had executed the family of Shangguan Wan'er. The happy and loved princess was gone. She had learned that love and family was but a dream. Only power was real. In 690 CE, Wu Zetian arranged a second marriage for Princess Taiping to another cousin, Wu Youji. According to certain anecdotes, Princess Taiping accepted this marriage because he was obedient and easy to control. The foundation for Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping's partnership was set, forged in fire. In the service quarters, the scholar Shangguan Wan'er was waiting for a chance. In a Ming palace, Princess Taiping was now a hardened political operator. Both were brilliant, ambitious, and shared a similar complex trauma. This would become the bond for their great alliance. In 690 CE, Emperor Wu Zetian forced Emperor Ruizong to abdicate and declared herself the new emperor of her own dynasty, the Wuzhou dynasty. As a female ruler, she was an anomaly. She was at odds with the old, powerful noble families that had dominated the Tang dynasty court. To break their grip on power, she launched a series of sweeping reforms. First, she attacked their monopoly on government jobs. The imperial examination system had existed since the Sui dynasty, but Wu Zetian massively expanded and championed it. She used it as a weapon, attracting scholars from common backgrounds to compete, promoting them based on talent, not just family names. Second, she broke the nobility's grip on military. Around 702 CE, she instituted and formalized the military imperial exams, ensuring that even commoners could become military officers as long as they had the talent and skills for it. But this created a new problem. Her direct advisors and secretaries were still staffed by traditional male officials, men from the very noble families that she is trying to replace. She also couldn't rely on the eunuchs. The eunuchs of that time period were generally uneducated and not capable of the complex administrative work that she required. She needed a new kind of official, one that was highly educated, deeply skilled, and loyal to her alone. So she built a female court. On one hand, it was a brilliant political solution. The old noble officials were her rivals. The new male scholars from the exam had their own factions. But a court of women would be promoted from slavery or educated in the palace. Their careers, their status, their very presence in the government would be entirely dependent on her. It guaranteed loyalty. But it wasn't just politics. Wu Zetian was famously believed in empowering women. She created new policies and deliberately changed existing systems to try to elevate the status of women to be equal to men. A strikingly modern concept. The clearest proof is in her famous 12 suggestions. In this set of reforms, she made a radical proposal that the traditional mourning period for a mother should be identical to the mourning period for a father. This was a pointed challenge to the Confucian-based patriarchal system that had long ruled Chinese empires. This was the period that would become known as the Red Makeup Era, a period where women were brought into the very heart of government. Wu Zetian didn't just stumble upon talented women, she actively sought them out. But she didn't just need any woman, she needed women with skills and knowledge. The official school for palace women within the imperial palace was the Neiwen Xueguan, or Inner Literary Institute. This school was responsible for training palace personnel and taught basic literacy, court etiquette, and rituals. Its purpose was to create more refined attendants and consorts. This was not what Wu Zetian needed, so she massively expanded the scope and curriculum of the school. The new Book of Tang clearly documents the detail of these changes. This was no longer a school for attendants and consorts. This was a university for training scholars and officials. Wu Zetian set the foundations for the creation of qualified female officials to run her empire. And the two pillars of this new system were Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping. Back around 677 CE, when Wu Zetian was still empress, she had already heard rumors of a brilliant girl named Shangguan Wan'er. Historical accounts describe that Wu Zetian summoned Shangguan Wan'er to test her on her knowledge, and Shangguan Wan'er passed with flying colors. Wu Zetian was impressed and immediately freed Shangguan Wan'er and her mother from slavery. She promoted Shangguan Wan'er to Cairen, making her a consort of Emperor Gaozong's imperial harem. This granted Shangguan Wan'er an official status within the inner court and allowed Wu Zetian to use her as her literary secretary. This was not a simple secretarial job. She was responsible for eloquently drafting and beautifully writing the emperor's most important documents and edicts. This position required immense talent and trust, but it was primarily an executional job. She was the instrument of power. By around 696 CE, Shangguan Wan'er's influence had become absolute. She was now performing the duties of a chancellor. She was the first person to read all incoming state business. She was the filter, deciding what was important, what to ignore, and what to present to the emperor. She was no longer just writing the imperial orders. She was now in a room advising Wu Zetian on what the order should be. She became famously known as the gown and cap chancellor, Jingguo Zaixiang. The historical record, Jinglong Wenguan Ji, describes the sheer scope of her power. She often had the decisive voice in matters of military and state strategy, and on matters of life and death. While Shangguan Wan'er worked her way up through Wu Zetian's court system, Princess Taiping became fully integrated into court politics. Wu Zetian treated the princess as a political confidant, the one person she trusted to navigate the treacherous court. Some accounts describe Princess Taiping as enjoying her power in politics, and she was often involved in secret government discussions. One of Princess Taiping's most significant accomplishments was her role in ending Lai Junchen's Reign of Terror. Lai Junchen was the head of Wu Zetian's secret police. He promoted the use of torture to extract false confessions and was responsible for executing thousands of officials and their families. While he was initially a useful tool for Wu Zetian to eliminate her political opponents, he eventually went too far. By 697 CE, Lai Junchen had become a monster who was threatening the very stability of the court. He was fabricating charges against everyone, even Wu Zetian's own Wu family, and even Princess Taiping herself. Princess Taiping provided the political cover and final push to have him arrested and executed. This wasn't an act against Wu Zetian, since Lai Junchen had gone rogue. His removal was beneficial for stabilizing the court and restoring confidence in Wu Zetian's rule. If you want to learn more about Lai Junchen and his Reign of Terror, check out my other video about the confession of Wu Zetian, linked in the description below. In 699 CE, Princess Taiping played an important role in establishing a truce between the Li family, which was the imperial family of the Tang Dynasty, and Wu Zetian's own family, the Wu family. This event was known as the Ming Palace Oath, where an oath of non-aggression was sworn between both families. One family was the rightful imperial family of the Tang Dynasty and contained Wu Zetian's sons. The other family was the paternal family of the founding emperor of the new Wuzhou dynasty and contained Wu Zetian's nephews. Tensions had been growing between these two powerful families, and it had seemed that a civil war was inevitable. This monumental event was believed to have greatly diffused the conflicts and prevented an actual war. While Shangguan Wan'er was running the empire's day-to-day bureaucracy, Princess Taiping was managing its high-stakes politics and family feuds. They were the two pillars of this new female court. They worked together in the same palace for over 2 decades. They weren't just colleagues, they were partners. Many modern accounts describe their relationship as being 闺蜜, which would translate to mean that they were besties. This was the bond that held the red makeup era together. It was a deep personal friendship that was also a powerful political alliance. But beyond these historical accomplishments, Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping's lives were also filled with scandalous stories. Later accounts even claim that Princess Taiping recommended lovers to her mother, filling her harem with handsome young men. If you want to learn more about Wu Zetian's male harem, check out my other video about it, linked in the description below. In addition, historical records also describe that Princess Taiping began taking her own lovers from among the court officials, just like her mother. This was not just a personal matter, it was a political one. For the powerful women of this specific time period, taking male consorts and lovers was a way to build a network of allies and agents loyal only to them. This practice became so common that it was used by later conservative scholars to prove that female rule was chaotic and immoral. Because a male emperor having hundreds of consorts was normal, but a powerful woman taking a few male partners was debauchery. How about that? Another famous scandal actually tried to explain the origins of red plum makeup, which was a popular style of an ancient Chinese act of decorating the forehead known as Hua Dian. This story involved Shangguan Wan'er and claimed that she violated an imperial order and was sentenced to death. However, Wu Zetian could not bring herself to kill her. It was said that Wu Zetian valued her talent so much that she reduced the death sentence to a facial tattoo. Unofficial historical accounts claim that this violation was an affair with one of Wu Zetian's lovers. In this version of events, Wu Zetian struck Shangguan Wan'er on her face, leaving a mark. Regardless of the exact events, this famous legend describes that Shangguan Wan'er covered the tattoo or scar on her forehead with a delicate plum blossom design makeup. This design was so beautiful that it instantly became popular as a fashion trend and would become known as the red plum makeup. By the early 700s CE, Wu Zetian's female court was at its peak. The great partnership between Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping had been formed, and they were about to use their combined power to change history. In the imperial palace, power was never permanent. By 700 CE, Emperor Wu Zetian was in her 70s, and the question of succession was the most important topic. For years, loyal Tang Dynasty officials like the famous Di Renjie had worked to preserve the imperial family line. They had convinced Wu Zetian that succession of the throne should not pass to her nephews from the Wu family, and instead should pass down to her sons from the imperial Li family. However, these Tang Dynasty loyalists faced a tricky situation. Traditionally, the throne should pass down to the eldest living son of the emperor, which in this case was the prince Li Xian. Remember Li Xian? He was Emperor Zhongzong back in 683 CE and was deposed and exiled by Wu Zetian in 684 CE. Di Renjie argued that Wu Zetian should follow the ancient traditions and recall Li Xian from exile and name him the crown prince. In 698 CE, Wu Zetian surprisingly agreed, and it seemed the future of the imperial Li family was secured. But a new threat had emerged, one that bypassed the traditional politics. Wu Zetian's new favorites, the Zhang brothers, who were Zhang Yizhi and Zhang Cangzong, had become much more than just Wu Zetian's lovers. As Wu Zetian grew older and frail, the Zhang brothers became her gatekeepers, isolating her from her officials. They had taken away influence and trust from Shangguan Wan'er. They had become a threat to everyone. Then, around 703 CE, the Zhang brothers made a fatal mistake. They decided to attack Princess Taiping's political network. They falsely accused one of her known lovers, an official named Gao Jian, of treason. This was a declaration of war. By attacking one of her key political partners, the Zhang brothers had just turned Wu Zetian's most dangerous daughter into their mortal enemy. This common threat pushed Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping into an act of betrayal. They saw that the emperor was no longer capable or willing to protect them, and they had to move against Wu Zetian, not for the Tang Dynasty, but to save themselves. Princess Taiping moved outside of the palace walls to form a secret coalition. She gathered and allied with a group of chancellors led by Zhang Jianzhi, who all wanted to get rid of the Zhang brothers. Most importantly, she got the support of her own brother, the now crown prince Li Xian. They believed that the Zhang brothers were going to kill all of them and had to fight for their lives. With Shangguan Wan'er's support from the inside of the imperial palace, they made sure that Wu Zetian didn't know what was happening. On February 20th, 705 CE, they launched what would be known as the Shenlong coup. They stormed the imperial palace. The old book of Tang describes that Wu Zetian was startled from her sleep, proving that Shangguan Wan'er was successful in keeping it secret. Their soldiers burst into the Hall of Enduring Life, found Zhang Yizhi and Zhang Cangzong, and executed them on the spot. Wu Zetian was surrounded and was forced to abdicate the throne, marking the end of her Wuzhou dynasty. She was moved to the Shangyang Palace, where she lived under house arrest for several months before passing away. The Tang Dynasty was restored, and Li Xian was the emperor again, as Emperor Zhongzong. There are many modern debates that argued that Princess Taiping should have taken the throne for herself instead of letting Li Xian become the new emperor. She was also a member of the imperial Li family, after all. However, I think the reality was that she couldn't. Remember that she had to ally herself with Zhang Jianzhi's group of high-ranking officials. They were officials who did not support a female ruler to begin with. They were definitely not going to support a new one. They had just risked their lives to save the empire from a female ruler and would only accepted a legitimate male heir, which was Li Xian. But this didn't mean that Princess Taiping was just going to sit back and relax now. She saw her brother as weak, and her plan was to rule through him instead. With the threat of the Zhang brothers gone, Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping should have been celebrating. But in the restored Tang Dynasty court of Emperor Zhongzong, their partnership immediately faced a new challenge: the emperor himself. Historical records described Emperor Zhongzong as a weak ruler, and he was deeply afraid of the very people who had put him on the throne. This included the chancellors led by Zhang Jianzhi and especially his own sister, Princess Taiping. And Emperor Zhongzong did not return to the throne alone. He brought with him his wife, who was now the new Empress Wei. And Empress Wei was not just a quiet consort. She was a hardened political survivor. When Wu Zetian had deposed Li Xian back in 684 CE, Empress Wei was the only one who went with him into his 14 years of brutal exile. During that time, they lived in constant terror, not knowing which day Wu Zetian would send an assassin to kill them. Empress Wei had suffered alongside her husband, and she now felt that she was entitled to a share of the power she had helped him reclaim. Wu Zetian was her role model. She felt that she could become everything that Wu Zetian was, and maybe even more. This meant that Princess Taiping had to go. Empress Wei's ambition combined with Emperor Zhongzong's fear set the stage for what happened next. At this time, there were three major factions in the imperial court. First, there was the Ku faction, made up of the Tang loyalists. This faction was led by Princess Taiping and the chancellors who led the coup that brought down Wu Zetian. As a reward for leading the coup, the 5 chancellors were granted the princely title of Wang and became known as the 5 kings. This faction held most of the power of the imperial court. While acting as advisors, they controlled most of what the emperor was allowed to do. Next, there was the imperial faction. This was the faction led by Emperor Zhongzong, Empress Wei, and their daughter, Princess Anle. While wielding the power on paper, this faction wanted to truly wield all of the power of the restored Tang Dynasty. And last, there was the Wu faction, led by the remaining members of the Wu family that still held powerful government positions, such as Wu Sanci. The Wu family needed to find a new path to survival, and also desperately wanted to reclaim the power that they once held under Wu Zetian. While the imperial faction and the Wu faction both wanted power for themselves, they agreed that the Ku faction held too much power. And with this understanding, a new alliance was formed against the Ku faction. Emperor Zhongzong may have been a weak ruler, but he definitely did one thing right. He knew that he had to immediately break up his sister's most powerful partnership. Emperor Zhongzong promoted Shangguan Wan'er to the high-ranking position of Zhaorong, a title normally reserved for a high-ranking consort. But this was not a marriage proposal, it was a political appointment. He gave her full authority over the drafting of all imperial edicts, effectively making her the most powerful chancellor of his rule. This was a brilliant political move. Shangguan Wan'er's own position and fate was now tied to Emperor Zhongzong. This huge promotion bound Shangguan Wan'er to the emperor's own interest. And since Princess Taiping was the emperor's biggest political rival, he broke up their powerful partnership by creating a direct conflict of loyalty. But Shangguan Wan'er's new job was not just drafting edicts. It was to help the emperor regain control of his own government. She was responsible for working with Wu Sanci and Empress Wei, supporting the new alliance against the powerful Ku faction. As a part of this, the Old Book of Tang claims that Shangguan Wan'er and Wu Sanci became lovers. But some modern interpretation challenged this, instead suggesting that their relationship was purely political. The official historical records even claim that Shangguan Wan'er had another lover during this time, a high-ranking official named Cui Shi. These records blame Shangguan Wan'er for nepotism, saying that Cui Shi was only promoted because of her favor. Unofficial anecdotes take this a step further and created a love triangle story between Shangguan Wan'er, Cui Shi, and Princess Taiping. In these stories, Shangguan Wan'er's private residence was described as a den of debauchery. Some modern accounts suggest that these scandals were created as a challenge to the power she held in court. Regardless of these scandalous events, the alliance between the imperial faction and the Wu faction happened, and it was effective. By 706 CE, all of the 5 kings had been slandered, stripped of their titles, and exiled. Wu Sansi then had them secretly assassinated or forced to commit suicide. This brutal purge also crippled Princess Taiping, who had now lost her most powerful allies at court. Historical records do not cover what happened to their relationships during this time, but their political path had gone in different ways. Now, with full administrative power, Shangguan Wan'er pushed forward a series of major reforms that would redefine the empire. First, she championed culture and education. But this wasn't just about building schools. She fundamentally changed the rules for promotion. While the Tang Dynasty already used the imperial exams to find administrators, Shangguan Wan'er argued that elegant literary and poetic talent should also be a direct path to high office. She advised the emperor to create the Shouwenguan, or Institute for the Cultivation of Literature, which was used to identify and promote the empire's best poets and writers. She personally hosted literary events and poetry competitions. Through these events, she would weigh the scholars of the realm. Her favor and acknowledgement became a reliable path to high-ranking government positions. But she wasn't completely selfless. Before her grandfather, Shang Guanyi, was executed, he was one of the most famous poets of his time. He pioneered a specific style of poetry known as the Shangguan style that became popular back in the court of Emperor Gaozong. She wanted to restore honor to her grandfather's achievements, so she championed the Shangguan style through these events. Any scholar who was trying to win her favor had to write using the Shangguan style, effectively restoring it as the dominant style of poetry. And then she pushed for major social and labor reforms. Historical records show that she pushed forward several groundbreaking laws. To start, she pushed for changing the national labor laws. She argued that the age for mandatory state labor and military service should be raised from 20 to 23, and the retirement age should be lowered from 60 to 59. This simple change gave every man in the empire several more years of freedom in his youth and an earlier retirement. Next, she strengthened the rights of women. She passed a law decreeing that sons must observe a full 3-year mourning period for their deceased mothers who had been divorced. This was a radical idea that affirmed a mother's status even after a divorce and reinforced her role in the family. She even pushed for a law to allow children of female officials to inherit their rank, just like male officials. The Ku faction had been greatly weakened, and imperial power had been mostly restored. For a brief moment, it has seemed that the Tang Dynasty was back on track. But then the plot thickened. Now with power, Empress Wei tried to emulate Wu Zetian to seize full control of the court. Unfortunately, while she was filled with the same ambitions, she did not demonstrate the same capability. Historical records criticize her as incapable of handling state affairs and blamed her for the sale of government positions for money. In addition, she even greatly upset many court officials by trying to name her daughter, Princess Anle, as crown princess, attempting to designate her as the heir to the empire. This new attempt to bypass the traditional line of imperial succession was seen as a direct threat and made Empress Wei deeply unpopular. More importantly, there was already a crown prince at the time. The crown prince was Li Chongjun, who was not a direct son of Empress Wei, but he was not going to sit quietly and let his rightful position of heir be taken away. In 707 CE, Li Chongjun forged an imperial edict to gather an army and launched what would be known as the Jinglong coup. His army stormed the residence of the Wu family, killing Wu Sansi and his son. Then his army marched on to the imperial palace. The new book of Tang described that they were looking to capture and kill Shangguan Wan'er. Shangguan Wan'er ran for her life, fleeing to the emperor and empress. In this moment of panic, her political mind took over. She told them that the crown prince was coming to kill them all. As I see it, the prince's plan is to kill me first and then move on to kill the empress and your majesty. Luckily, the three of them were able to escape to safety, and the Jinglong coup was successfully stopped. The crown prince fled the capital, but was hunted down and killed by his remaining soldiers as an act of self-preservation, because they realized they had been tricked with a false edict. This was a wake-up call for Shangguan Wan'er. She needed a safer ally. She needed someone that she could trust with her life. She needed Princess Taiping. After the failed but scary Jinglong coup, Shangguan Wan'er began to distance herself from Empress Wei, but kept her position as a loyal servant to the emperor. And in secret, she made up with her bestie, Princess Taiping. Shangguan Wan'er began to oppose Empress Wei from the inside. Now that the crown prince was dead, Empress Wei saw an even bigger opportunity to push her agenda. She began to aggressively push for Princess Anle to become the crown princess. And Shangguan Wan'er pushed back. Shangguan Wan'er protested against Empress Wei's corruption, even threatening to resign her position and shaved her head to become a nun. But the emperor ignored her pleas. In a last desperate act, Shangguan Wan'er tried to poison herself to show her resolve. But she was not successful and was saved by imperial doctors. She was trying to convince the emperor to officially break from Empress Wei. Unfortunately, Emperor Zhongzong would not do it, and he would pay for this choice. On July 3rd, 710 CE, Emperor Zhongzong suddenly died. The historical accounts are clear. He was poisoned. It was a plot by Empress Wei and Princess Anle to seize the throne. Empress Wei hid the emperor's death to buy herself enough time to install her own loyalists into the palace guard. But Shangguan Wan'er found out, and together with Princess Taiping, they made their final move as partners. They forged an imperial will, this time not as a coup, but as a desperate attempt to create a balance of power. This will would name Emperor Zhongzong's only remaining son, the young Li Chongmao, as the new emperor, with Empress Wei as Empress Dowager and Regent. However, it also named Princess Taiping's brother Li Dan as a co-regent. This was their plan to keep Empress Wei from complete control of the government. But Empress Wei was not interested in sharing power. Her supporters got their hands on the will and altered it. This new will cut Li Dan out completely and gave Empress Wei full authority. For Princess Taiping, this was the last straw. Their peaceful plan had failed. She had only one option left. You guessed it, another coup. Empress Wei almost had full control over the court. Princess Taiping didn't have a lot of time, and she didn't have a lot of options. She turned to her nephew, Li Longji, the son of Li Dan. Li Dan would have been a stronger choice for legitimacy, but he did not hold a lot of political power and lacked immediate control over any military sources. Li Longji, on the other hand, held a commanding position within the Imperial Guard, which gave him real military power. On the night of July 21st, 710 CE, they launched the Tanglong coup. Li Longji and his troops stormed the palace and quickly captured and executed Empress Wei and Princess Anle. Shangguan Wan'er knew exactly what was happening. She was not a target, she was an ally. This was her side, and Princess Taiping was finally taking control. She did not hide from the soldiers. Instead, historical records state that she personally went to greet them. To prove her loyalty beyond any doubt, she brought with her the one piece of evidence that would clear her name. The original draft of the will that she had co-drafted with Princess Taiping. This document was her proof, written in her own hand, that she was loyal to Li Longji's father. But Li Longji ignored her explanation and gave the order to kill her. Shangguan Wan'er was executed on the spot. Shangguan Wan'er's alliance with Empress Wei back in 705 CE had given Li Longji the perfect cover story of killing a corrupt official. But his true goal was to kill his aunt's most brilliant and most loyal partner. The most brilliant official of the female court was dead. After the Tanglong coup, Li Dan became the Emperor Ruizong for the second time. But he was pretty much an emperor in name only. His son, Li Longji, held power over the imperial palace military forces and was immediately made crown prince. Princess Taiping held power in the court and controlled the government. The emperor just wanted to live the rest of his life at peace and purposely maintained a neutral stance. And so, the true battle for the throne had just begun. The execution of Shangguan Wan'er was not the end of her story. It was the beginning of a brutal political war, fought by the two remaining powers. This war created two completely different versions of Shangguan Wan'er. First, there was Li Longji's claim of the corrupt traitor. This was his official justification for the murder. He claimed that Shangguan Wan'er was a symbol of debauchery and a loyal member of the Wei faction. This was the story that was recorded into official histories such as the Old Book of Tang and the New Book of Tang. Princess Taiping was deeply impacted by Shangguan Wan'er's death, and she immediately made sure that Shangguan Wan'er received a proper and honorable funeral. But her grief quickly channeled into political fury. With Emperor Ruizong choosing to sit out of politics, Princess Taiping was now the most powerful person in the empire. Many of the highest-ranking officials were directly appointed by her. In fact, the emperor was so reliant on her that he would redirect all matters of state affairs to her. Princess Taiping tried to punish any government officials that opposed her and spread rumors and lies about Li Longji, arguing that he was not fit to be the crown prince. Princess Taiping even began gathering weapons and planned to take full control of the government by force. And then Li Longji discovered that Princess Taiping was planning to poison him. In 713 CE, Li Longji was forced to launch another coup, the Xiantian coup, this time for his own survival. His forces quickly captured all of Princess Taiping's supporters and executed them. Princess Taiping was captured and was forced to commit suicide. The last surviving mark of the red makeup era was gone. Years later, after Li Longji took the throne as Emperor Shenzong, he ordered the creation of the collected works of Lady Shangguan, which was a compilation of Shangguan Wan'er's poetry. This was to honor the memory of her contributions to the culture of the Tang Dynasty. Or at least, that's what happened according to the official histories like the Old Book of Tang. In 2013, an archaeological excavation in Xianyang city of the Shanxi province discovered the tomb of Shangguan Wan'er. In this tomb, a hidden epitaph was found. This epitaph was a biography of Shangguan Wan'er, created by Princess Taiping in 710 CE, right after Shangguan Wan'er's death. This biography in stone was Princess Taiping's story. It detailed Shangguan Wan'er's opposition to Empress Wei, fully explaining that she was not a collaborator but a Tang Dynasty hero who resisted at every chance. It praised Shangguan Wan'er for her literary brilliance, her administrative contributions, and her loyalty. It described that Shangguan Wan'er was fully honored by Emperor Ruizong after her death. She was granted a posthumous title, Hui Wen, which meant gracious and cultured. She was given a formal state burial with the highest of honors. This biography showed Princess Taiping's devastating sorrow. This was not just a political loss. It was a personal one. She had lost her best friend. If Princess Taiping's story was true, then it meant that Li Longji had murdered a hero. And remember the collected works of Lady Shangguan that was credited to Emperor Shenzong in official records? So it turns out that this poetry compilation was compiled by the famous Tang Dynasty scholar Zhang Yue. He wrote a preface to this compilation as a sign of his own contribution. and he explicitly credited Princess Taiping as the person who requested this creation. Zhang Yue had no reason to lie about Princess Taiping's involvement, which makes his preface even more credible. And if the official records were wrong about something as simple as who commissioned a compilation of poetry, then it does leave us with questions about its coverage for this time period. As the saying goes, history is written by the victors. But regardless of what truly happened between Princess Taiping and Li Longji, the legal and cultural legacy of the red makeup era cannot be denied. As the red makeup era ended, the age of the Tang Dynasty eunuch officials began, a shift that would plague the Tang Dynasty for centuries. This also opened the door for the rise of the powerful consort Yang Guifei, whose influence helped set the stage of the devastating Anlushan rebellion in 755 CE. This rebellion marked the end of the golden age of the Tang Dynasty and the beginning of its long decline. But that's another story for another time. The story of Shangguan Wan'er and Princess Taiping is a testament to their brilliance and contributions. But it's also a lesson in what happens to the histories of powerful women when their enemies are the ones left to write it. What do you think of these two best friends? Let me know in the comments. If you enjoyed today's topic, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
Stay curious, stay magical.